My name is Maya Rodriguez. I'm 28 years old and the CEO of HealthSync, a startup that was set to change the American healthcare system forever. At least, that was the plan, until Vivian Blackwell tried to steal everything I had worked for over the years. What she didn't expect? That I would discover her trap on page 47 of the contract, and that I would set my own trap in the exact same place. But let's go back to the beginning. 3 years ago, I was sitting by my grandmother Inez's hospital bed, holding her hand as she struggled to breathe. She had been admitted for a simple case of pneumonia, something treatable, but the hospital administered a medication that fatally interacted with the heart meds she was already taking. A system failure. A preventable mistake. "I'm so sorry, Miss Rodriguez," the doctor said, avoiding my gaze. Sometimes, with elderly patients, it's hard to keep track of all their medications. Hard? Unacceptable was the word. My grandmother, who had fled a dictatorship with nothing but the clothes on her back to give our family a better life, died because of a bureaucratic mistake. A mistake that technology could have prevented. The following week, while my family grieved, I coded. With my background in biotechnology and years of experience as a developer, I knew I could build something better. I reached out to Elijah Chen, my college friend and a brilliant researcher in digital health. "We need to create a system that stops this from happening again," I told him, my eyes red from crying and coding. "An algorithm that syncs all medical data and alerts doctors about drug interactions before they happen." Elijah didn't hesitate. "I'm in, but we'll need serious capital," and that's how HealthSync was born. Our algorithm was revolutionary. It analyzed medical history, current tests, prescriptions, and even genetic predispositions to detect potentially dangerous interactions. In the first tests at 2 smaller hospitals, we prevented 217 severe drug interactions in just 3 months. We were saving lives. But to reach hospitals across the country, we needed serious investment. And that's when the problem started. "Your product is interesting, Miss Rodriguez, but maybe it needs a CEO with more experience. Who would run the company if you decided to start a family? You don't seem to have the presence needed to lead a healthcare company." I refused to translate what those comments really meant. Too young, too female, too Latina. After 43 meetings with potential investors and 43 rejections, our financial reserves were running out. That's when I heard about Vivian Blackwell. One of the few women at the top of the venture capital world, known for supporting minority-led companies. Her firm, Blackwell Ventures, had an impressive portfolio. Landing a meeting with her was nearly impossible. Nearly after 3 months of persistent emails, attending events where I knew she would be, and finally getting a recommendation from another founder she had funded, I received the email. "Miss Rodriguez, Vivian Blackwell would like to learn more about your company. Are you available Tuesday?" At 9 a.m., I spent the entire weekend perfecting our pitch. Amanda Lewis, our COO, reviewed every slide to exhaustion, and Elijah triple-checked all the data. "Maya, you're shaking," Amanda noted on the morning of the meeting as we waited in the luxurious lobby of Blackwell Ventures. "It's my natural state now," I joked, adjusting my blazer for the 10th time. 50% coffee, 50% anxiety. When Vivian Blackwell walked into the room, I understood why she had that reputation. Tall, elegant, with perfectly styled silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than my semester's rent. She radiated power. "Maya Rodriguez," she said, extending her hand. "We finally meet. I've been following your work for a while." The presentation flowed better than I expected. Vivian asked sharp but fair questions. Her eyes sparkled when I demonstrated how our algorithm had predicted a drug interaction that could have been fatal for an 8-year-old patient. "How many lives has your system saved?" she asked, leaning forward. 217 confirmed. "In the small hospitals where we've implemented it," I replied. "But with proper scaling, we estimate we could save tens of thousands per year in the US alone." By the end of the meeting, Vivian smiled, a smile that, I now realize, never quite reached her eyes. "I'm impressed, Maya. I rarely see a founder so passionate and a technology so promising. I'd like to make an offer, $10 million for 25% of HealthSync. $10 million. More than enough to expand into hospitals nationwide. More than enough to honor my grandmother's memory. That's extremely generous, I stammered, trying to maintain my composure. I believe in your vision, Maya, Vivian said, her voice smooth as velvet. And frankly, we need more women transforming the healthcare industry. As we left the building, Amanda hugged me, jumping with excitement. Even Elijah, usually so reserved, was smiling, but in the taxi he voiced the first concern. Maya, you do know Vivian has a particular reputation in the Valley, right? For being one of the few successful female investors? I shot back. For being ruthless, he corrected. Some call her the predator. They say she has aggressive tactics. I rolled my eyes. Of course they do. A powerful woman is always aggressive, while a man would be assertive. Vivian understands what we're up against, Elijah. She's been through it too. He didn't push further, but now I know I should have paid more attention to his words. The following weeks were a whirlwind. The Blackwell Ventures team began the due diligence process, reviewing our finances, technology, and operations. At TIS, first, everything seemed normal. Detailed questions, document requests, meetings with every team member. Then came the first red flag. We'll need full access to the source code and all intellectual property details before finalizing the deal, one of Vivian's lawyers informed us. Elijah visibly tensed. That's not standard. Full access usually comes after closing. The lawyer gave a cold smile. Ms. Blackwell is not a standard investor. She needs to fully understand what she's investing in. Reluctantly, we agreed, with safeguards and confidentiality agreements, of course. But the pressure kept mounting. More meetings, more questions, more shared files. Amanda seemed particularly enthusiastic about Vivian's interest. The two of them started having lunch together regularly. To speed up the due diligence process, Amanda explained. Don't you find it odd that Vivian is so personally involved? I asked Elijah during one of our rare quiet moments in the office. I've been saying that from the start, he replied, rubbing his tired eyes. But we're almost at the finish line, Maya. We just need to hold on a little longer. Finally, 2 months after the initial offer, we received the final contract, an intimidating 200-page document filled with legal terms, conditions, clauses, and subclauses. You have 48 hours to review and sign, Blackwell's lawyer informed us. Ms. Blackwell needs to close this investment by the end of the quarter. That's not enough time for a proper review, I argued. We need our lawyers. Maya, Vivian interrupted, pulling me aside. I understand your concern, but the window of opportunity is closing. I've received information that 2 of our competitors are considering investing in similar technologies. If we don't close now, the moment may pass. I felt the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. Our financial reserves were nearly depleted. We had employees depending on us. We had patients who needed our technology. I'll do my best to review it in time, I promised. That night was a blur of pages upon pages of legal jargon. By around 3 my eyes were burning. I decided I needed a few hours of sleep. I'd go over the document again in the morning with a clearer mind. I had barely laid down when my phone rang. An unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something made me pick up. Maya Rodriguez? A male voice asked, deliberately distorted. Who is this? Someone who's been on the other side and knows how Vivian Blackwell operates. Page 47, clause 16.3. Read it carefully before you sign anything. The call ended before I could ask any more questions. Now fully awake, I went back to the contract and located page 47. Buried in the middle of seemingly harmless paragraphs about performance guarantees and evaluation metrics, I found clause 16.3. In the event that the company fails to achieve 200% revenue growth and 350% expansion in partner hospitals within 6 months of the investment, Blackwell Ventures reserves the right to assume full operational and management control, including but not limited to replacing any members of the executive team at its sole discretion. I read it 5 times to make sure I was understanding it correctly. Those targets were practically impossible. No medical technology startup could achieve 200% growth in 6 months. The sales cycle for hospitals is notoriously long, often taking 12 to 18 months to close a contract. It was a trap, a sleek, well-crafted legal trap. The next morning, with deep dark circles under my eyes, I called an urgent meeting with Elijah. I showed him the clause. "This is insane," he murmured, rereading the text. "It's basically a guarantee that we'll lose control of the company in 6 months. We need to talk to Vivian." We managed to get a meeting that same afternoon. Vivian seemed perfectly calm as I pointed out the problematic clause. "Maya, this is just standard investor protection," she explained with a serene smile. "Every venture investment includes protection clauses." "Standard?" I repeated, incredulous. "Unattainable targets that ensure you take over my company in 6 months are standard?" Her smile faded. "Maybe they're unattainable for someone with your limited experience in scaling. That's exactly why these clauses exist, to ensure the investment is protected when inexperienced founders fail to deliver on their promises. I never promised 200% growth in 6 months. That is technically impossible in our industry." Vivian leaned back in her chair, all pretense of cordiality now gone. "Let's be direct, Maya. You have a brilliant product, but you don't have what it takes to lead a company at scale. Without my investment, HealthSync will be dead in a matter of weeks. With my investment and experienced leadership, your technology will save lives. Isn't that the ultimate goal?" "The goal is to save lives without sacrificing the integrity of our vision," I replied, trying to steady my voice, shaking with anger. "Noble but naive," she countered. "Look, I'll be transparent since you found the clause. I never believed you had the ability to scale this company. My intention was always to take over and replace you with someone more experienced as soon as I had access to the technology. This isn't personal, it's business." "Then I'll reject your offer," I declared, rising from my seat. Vivian's smile returned, now openly predatory. "You can try, but I've already spoken with Apex Ventures, MedTech Capital, and Summit Partners, all potential investors you'd likely approach next. I've expressed concerns about instability in HealthSync's leadership. Subtly, of course." I felt my stomach drop. She had blocked our exits. With our financial reserves nearly depleted and payroll approaching, we were cornered. "The contract is on your desk," Vivian said smoothly. "You have until tomorrow. Sign it or lose everything." I left her office feeling like the world was collapsing around me. In the hallway, I ran into Amanda, who looked strangely uneasy at the sight of me. "Maya, I thought you had already left." "I just had a very enlightening conversation with Vivian," I replied coldly. "She admitted she plans to replace us as soon as we sign." Amanda's face went pale, but not in surprise, in guilt. "You already knew," I realized, the pieces falling into place. "The lunches, the private meetings. She recruited you, didn't she?" Amanda glanced around nervously. "It's not that simple, Maya. Vivian offered me the position of Chief Operating Officer in the new structure. She said you'd be kept on as a technical consultant, that no one would lose their jobs. She showed me the numbers. Without this, investment will be bankrupt in weeks." "So you decided to betray us?" "I decided to save the company," she whispered fiercely. "Someone had to be pragmatic. You and Elijah are brilliant, but far too naive for the business world." I left her, standing there, my world crumbling even further with each revelation. Back in our office, I found Elijah furiously typing at his computer. "We have an even bigger problem," he said without looking up. "I just got an email from IT Med Solutions canceling our negotiations. Someone spread rumors about instability at HealthSync." "Vivian," I confirmed, collapsing into a chair. "She's blocking all our alternatives." Silence hung between us as the reality of our situation settled in. "What do we do now?" Elijah finally asked. I looked out the window at the San Francisco skyline, thinking about my grandmother, about all the lives we could save, about everything we had worked for. I couldn't let Vivian win. Not like this. "We need to find out who warned me about page 47, I responded slowly. "That person knows how Vivian operates. Maybe they know how we can beat her at her own game." I traced the mysterious number, but it led to a prepaid phone. I tried calling back several times without success. Whoever it was, they knew how to stay anonymous. At 2 a.m., exhausted but unable to sleep, I received a text message. Cafe Reverie, tomorrow, 3 p.m., back table, come alone. Cafe Reverie was a small spot in the Mission District, far from the trendy places frequented by investors and tech executives. When I arrived at exactly 3 p.m., the place was nearly empty. At the back table, a middle-aged man with glasses and an unshaven face was nervously looking out the window. "Are you the one who called me about page 47? I asked, sitting across from him. He nodded, checking his surroundings one more time before speaking. "My name is Thomas Reed. I worked for Vivian Blackwell for 7 years. Worked. Past tense. I left 8 months ago after I recognized the pattern, or rather, after I became part of it." He opened a worn-out laptop. "You're not the first, Maya, and if you hadn't gotten my warning, you wouldn't be the last." Thomas turned the screen toward me. It was a spreadsheet filled with startup names, all founded by women or minorities, all with promising technology, all eventually acquired by Blackwell Ventures. Biometrics, founded by Jessica Wong. Vivian made the same generous offer, then used a hidden clause about intellectual property to force her out. Neurotech, founded by Raj Patel. Vivian used impossible metrics as a trigger to take over. Ecogene, Thrive Health, Quantum Solutions, same pattern, different traps. I scrolled through the list, my stomach sinking. I recognized some names, startups, that had started with great promise, now anonymous subsidiaries of Blackwell, with their original founders completely removed. Why does she do this? Is it just for profit? Thomas took a sip of coffee before answering. It's more complicated. Vivian has a kind of theory. She believes startup founders, especially those from underrepresented groups, are excellent at innovation, but unfit to scale companies. Her model is to free them from their creations so they can innovate again. Free them? I repeated, incredulous. She steals from them and calls it liberation? In her twisted mind, she's doing them a favor. Thomas shut the laptop. I was the legal director who drafted those contracts. I designed the traps she's now using against you. And with every acquisition, we saw the same pattern. The company grew under Vivian's control, but it lost its essence, its original purpose. Why are you helping me now? He looked away, guilt visible on his face. My daughter, she developed a rare heart condition last year. She was hospitalized 3 times due to medication errors, the exact problem your technology solves. When I saw HealthSync on Vivian's target list and realized what you were building, he shook his head. I couldn't let this happen again. Not to something that could save lives, like my daughter's. His sincerity was undeniable. But we still needed a concrete solution. Even knowing about the trap, we're cornered, I explained. Vivian blocked all other potential investors. Our financial reserves will run out in 3 weeks. Without her investment, we lose everything. There's another option, Thomas suggested. Do you know Zoe Parker? The name was familiar. The startup lawyer? She helped me when we were starting out, but she moved to London a year ago. Zoe specializes in protecting founders from predatory investors, and she has a personal history with Vivian. Reach out to her. I left the cafe with a small spark of hope. That same night, I managed to set up a video call with Zoe despite the time difference. Maya! Zoe exclaimed when her image appeared on the screen. Thomas called me. I'm so sorry you got caught in Vivian's web. He said you might be able to help us. That you have history with her. Zoe's usually warm face hardened. Vivian Blackwell was my client before I specialized in representing founders. I saw firsthand how she operates. After I refused to draft a particularly predatory contract, she ruined my reputation in San Francisco. That's why I moved to London. Then you understand what we're up against. Perfectly. And I have a strategy, but it's risky. Zoe leaned closer to the camera. Instead of fighting the contract, you're going to sign it. What? But that would give her, you're going to sign Vivian's contract, but with a small modification from us, on the same page 47 where she hid the trap. The irony was perfect. What kind of modification? A counter-trap. Something that looks harmless at first glance, but actually flips the control entirely if she tries to take over the company. We spent the next 2 hours outlining the strategy. By the time we finished, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. "This won't be easy, Maya," Zoe warned before we ended the call. "Vivian is smart and cautious. You'll have to be smarter." "What about the modified contract? Won't she notice?" "Trust me, I know exactly how to draft this so it looks like part of the original document. But you'll need a distraction at the signing, something to make sure she doesn't read every word carefully." The next morning, I met Elijah in our still empty office. I explained the plan. "It's brilliant," he agreed after hearing everything, "but dangerous. If she finds out, we'll be in the same situation we're already in, with no way out." "What about Amanda? Can we trust her now that we know about her betrayal?" It was a valid question. I decided to confront her directly. I called her for a private conversation in the meeting room. "I know Vivian recruited you," I began bluntly. "I know you've been sharing internal information with her." Amanda opened her mouth to protest, but then her shoulders slumped in defeat. "Maya, I don't need excuses. I need to know why. What did she offer that made it worth betraying everything we built?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "It wasn't what she offered. It was what she threatened to take away." "What are you talking about?" Amanda pulled out her phone and showed me a series of emails. They were correspondences between her and a former employee from the company where she had previously worked, containing confidential information she had illegally shared. It was 3 years ago, before HealthSync. I was trying to help my brother with his startup, so I shared some market data I had access to. Somehow Vivian found out and threatened to expose everything unless I cooperated. I would have been sued, possibly jailed. I remained silent, processing the revelation. Blackmail. Another tactic in Vivian's arsenal. "What are you going to do?" "Now?" Amanda asked, apprehensive. "I'll understand if you fire me," I thought for a moment. "I'm not going to fire you. I'm giving you a chance to fix this. In fact, you're going to be crucial to our plan." Her eyes widened. "What plan?" "We're going to give Vivian exactly what she wants, and then we're going to turn the tables." Over the next 36 hours, we worked tirelessly. Zoe sent the modified version of the contract, with an additional clause discreetly inserted on page 47. Elijah worked secretly with Thomas to document all of Vivian's questionable communications, and I prepared the biggest distraction of all. On the morning of the signing, I called Vivian. "Good morning, Maya," she answered, confidence evident in her voice. "Ready to take the next step for HealthSync's success?" "Yes," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "But I have a request. I'd like to hold a small signing ceremony with our entire team present. After all, this is a historic moment for all of us." There was a brief hesitation. "That's not really necessary. I insist, Vivian. I want everyone to witness the beginning of this important partnership. We'll even serve champagne." Vanity won over caution. "Very well, as long as everything is prepared for a quick and efficient signing." "Of course. It will be quick, efficient, and memorable." At 2:00 p.m., our office had been transformed. We placed an elegant table at the center of the open space, with 2 chairs facing each other. The entire HealthSync team was present, along with some of Vivian's executives. A photographer had been hired to document the historic moment, I explained. Vivian arrived punctually, impeccably dressed as always, flashing her best smile for the camera. She greeted each team member, flawlessly playing the role of the enthusiastic investor. "Before we begin," I announced when everyone was gathered, "I'd like to express how much this moment means to me personally." Vivian nodded politely, discreetly, checking her watch. As some of you know, I founded HealthSync after losing my grandmother to a preventable medical error. Inez Rodriguez fled a dictatorship to give our family a better life. She cleaned houses, worked in factories, did everything she could so I could study and pursue my dreams. I noticed I had captured Vivian's full attention now. She hadn't expected an emotional speech. This investment means that her sacrifice was not in vain. It means we can take our technology to hospitals across the country, saving countless lives. My voice faltered, genuine tears forming. It means other families won't have to go through what mine did. The room was dead silent. Even Vivian's executives seemed moved. This was the moment, when everyone was emotionally invested, when Vivian was impatient to get to the signing, when the distraction was at its peak. So, without further delay, I concluded, wiping a tear, let's sign this historic agreement. Amanda stepped forward with 2 identical copies of the contract, except they weren't identical. One was Vivian's original contract. The other was our modified version, with the counter trap carefully inserted on page 47. Both copies have already been reviewed by the lawyers, Amanda explained professionally. One for HealthSync, one for Blackwell Ventures. Vivian picked up a pen, clearly eager to finalize the deal. Who signs first? Please, I offered with a gesture. The honor is yours. Without hesitation, Vivian signed her copy, our modified contract. As she signed, Elijah discreetly activated the camera on his phone, recording the moment. When it was my turn, I signed Vivian's original copy with a serene smile. Champagne glasses were distributed, toasts were made, photos were taken. The deal was sealed, or so Vivian thought. I'm glad we've reached a deal that benefits everyone, Vivian said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. And now, if you'll... Excuse me, I'd like to make a few announcements about HealthSync's future. This was the moment I had feared and anticipated, the moment she would reveal her true intentions. As the new majority investor, I'm implementing some immediate strategic changes, Vivian continued, her tone shifting to something more authoritative. First, Maya will remain with us, but in a new role as chief technical consultant, focusing on what she does best, innovation. Confused murmurs rippled through the team. Vivian went on. To lead HealthSync into its next phase of growth, I am appointing Amanda Lewis as interim CEO while we search for an experienced executive for the permanent role. Amanda, following the script we had planned, pretended to be surprised and grateful. Vivian continued announcing other changes, new departments, new structures, a new board, essentially dismantling everything we had built. When she finally finished, she was met with stunned silence. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my reaction. Vivian watched me with a triumphant smile, clearly expecting tears, protests, or a dramatic exit. Instead, I smiled calmly. This is interesting, Vivian, but I think you forgot to read something important. What are you talking about? Her smile faltered slightly. Page 47 of the contract you just signed. Clause 16.4. Vivian frowned, confused. There is no clause. 16.4. Not in your original version, no. But in the version you signed just minutes ago, there is. I took my copy of the contract and opened it directly to page 47. Let me read it for you. Vivian's face paled as I began to read aloud. Clause 16.4. Any attempt to alter HealthSync's executive structure within the first 18 months following the investment, without unanimous and documented approval from the original founders, will automatically result in A. An obligation to fully reimburse the invested amount within 30 days. B. An irrevocable transfer of 15% of Blackwell Ventures shares to the original founders of HealthSync. And C. A mandatory public disclosure, in the form of a press release, detailing the predatory tactics employed in the attempted hostile takeover. A deadly silence fell over the room. Vivian snatched the contract from my hands, flipping furiously to page 47. Her eyes scanned the text once, twice, 3 times, her face growing redder with each pass. This is fraud! She finally exploded. You altered the contract after I signed it. Actually, no, I replied calmly. You signed this exact document in front of dozens of witnesses and a professional photographer. I gestured toward Elijah, who raised his phone. And we have it all on video. This won't stand, Vivian threatened, her voice trembling with rage. I have the best lawyers in the country. I'll sue you into bankruptcy. You can try, I agreed. But I think your lawyers will advise you against that, because in addition to the video of the signing, we also have documentation of all your questionable tactics, the emails threatening Amanda, The conversations where you explicitly admitted you planned to replace me from the start. The contacts with other investors to spread false rumors about HealthSync. Vivian looked around like a cornered animal searching for an escape. And there's one more thing you should know, I continued. While you were busy trying to steal my company, I was busy securing our future. Yesterday, we finalized a preliminary agreement with a consortium of hospitals and doctors who believe in our mission. They are willing to invest in HealthSync on our terms, with our leadership intact. Impossible, Vivian stammered. I blocked all potential investors. Not all of them. You focused on traditional venture capitalists. You forgot about the doctors, hospital administrators, and patients who actually care about what we're building. Thomas Reed chose that moment to step into the room, accompanied by 2 men and a woman in formal attire. Maya, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. James Wilson, Director of San Francisco General, Dr. Sarah Chen, Head of the California Medical Association, and Michael Torres, representing the Patient Safety Foundation. The 3 stepped forward, completely ignoring Vivian. Ms. Rodriguez, Dr. Wilson said, extending his hand, we are extremely impressed with your technology and your integrity. Our consortium is prepared to offer the same $10 million, but for only 15% of the company, keeping you and your team in full control. The shift in the atmosphere was immediate. The employees who had looked shocked and betrayed just moments ago now smiled and whispered excitedly. This isn't over, Vivian hissed, grabbing her bag. You have no idea who you're dealing with. On the contrary, I replied, keeping my composure. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. The question is, do you? She stormed out, her executives trailing behind her. The moment the door closed behind them, the room erupted in applause and hugs. Even Amanda, still grappling with her guilt, was included in the celebration. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I finally allowed the tension of the past few weeks to fade. I cried out of relief, exhaustion, vindication. And when the tears dried, I picked up the picture frame with my grandmother's photo. We did it, Abuela, I whispered. They tried to bring us down, but they forgot to read page 47. The next morning, the HealthSync office was unrecognizable. Where there had once been anxiety and uncertainty, a renewed energy now pulsed through the space. Every team member worked with a doubled sense of purpose, as if we had all been reborn after facing extinction. The contract with the consortium just arrived, Elijah announced, stepping into my office with an envelope. Exactly as we discussed. 10 million, 15% equity, full operational autonomy retained by the founders. I took the documents, still feeling slightly unreal. And Vivian? Radio silence since yesterday, but Thomas said she's stormily contained, according to his sources. She has plenty of options, I mused. She could try to sue and risk public exposure. She could honor the contract she signed, which means returning the investment and giving up 15% of Blackwell Ventures. Or she could try to make it all disappear with a quiet settlement. What do you think she'll choose? I smiled. The path that hurts her ego the least. Vivian cares about her reputation above all else. I didn't have to wait long for an answer. By late afternoon, I received an email from Blackwell Ventures' lead attorney requesting an urgent meeting. When I met him the next day at a neutral law firm, he placed a simple contract on the table. Ms. Blackwell is willing to fully rescind the agreement, returning all signatures and treating it as if nothing ever happened. No penalties, no equity transfer, no press statements. As if you and she never met. And what do we get in exchange for this? Act of mercy? I asked, already knowing the answer. Complete silence about the incident and a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. I considered the offer for a few moments. It was tempting to simply turn the page and move forward with our new investment. But something inside me refused to let Vivian walk away unscathed, free to find her next victim. Counteroffer, I finally responded. We'll agree to rescind the contract, but with 2 non-negotiable conditions. The attorney raised an eyebrow. Which are? First, Vivian must provide financial compensation to every startup she has harmed using similar tactics. Thomas Reed will provide the full list. That's second, I continued, ignoring his objection. She must sign an agreement committing to never again use predatory hidden clauses in investment contracts. Every violation will result in a substantial penalty paid directly to funds that support underrepresented entrepreneurs. The attorney adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable. Ms. Blackwell will never agree to these terms. Then I suggest she prepare for a very, very loud public lawsuit. One that will expose not just what she tried to do to HealthSync, but what she has done to every other startup in her trail of destruction. I stood up, grabbing my bag. She has 48 hours to decide. I walked out of that meeting feeling empowered. I wasn't just fighting for my company anymore. I was fighting for every founder who came before me and everyone who would come after. For 47 hours, a detail that did not escape me, I received no response. Then, with just 1 hour left before my ultimatum expired, the attorney sent a simple email. Terms accepted. Contracts in preparation. Vivian Blackwell, Silicon Valley's ruthless predator, had surrendered. With the road clear of threats, we could finally go back to doing what truly mattered, developing our technology and saving lives. The hospital consortium's investment gave HealthSync not just the necessary capital, but something even more valuable: clinical credibility. Over the next 6 months, we expanded from 2 hospitals to 27. Our algorithm grew smarter with every new implementation, learning from patterns and refining its predictions. We received weekly reports of dangerous drug interactions. Prevented. Lives saved by lines of code inspired by the loss of my grandmother. Amanda, redeemed after her full confession, became a fierce advocate for corporate safety and ethics. Elijah led the expansion of our technical team, bringing in brilliant minds who believed in our mission. And Thomas Reed joined us as a consultant, using his insider knowledge to help us navigate the complex world of venture capital. But our battle with Vivian inevitably leaked, as these stories always do in Silicon Valley. First as whispers at networking events, then as hushed conversations at tech conferences. Finally, an investigative report in TechCrunch laid out the entire saga, including the trap on page 47 and our counter-trap. The impact was immediate and far-reaching. Startup founders began reaching out, sharing similar stories of predatory clauses and manipulative investors. Tech company lawyers started scrutinizing their contracts with newfound diligence. And some, venture capitalists, the ones genuinely interested in building healthy companies, not just extracting value, began reevaluating their contract practices. 6 months turned into a year. HealthSync continued to grow, now implemented in over 100 hospitals nationwide. On one particularly meaningful afternoon, I received an email from a doctor at St. Agnes Hospital in Fresno. Your algorithm flagged a potentially fatal interaction between 2 medications prescribed to an elderly patient today. The patient is 72 years old, an immigrant, doesn't speak English. Without your system, we would have made the same mistake that took your grandmother's life. Thank you for turning your loss into something that saves lives. I read that email at least 20 times, silent tears streaming down my face. All the stress, all the struggle, all the confrontation with Vivian, it was all worth it for this one moment. That week, I received a surprising invitation. The Women in Tech organization wanted me to be the keynote speaker at their annual conference, speaking on resilience and resistance, protecting your vision as a founder. On the day of the conference, the auditorium was packed, hundreds of women, many of them founders or aspiring entrepreneurs. As I stepped onto the stage, I saw faces eager for guidance, for hope, for strategies to navigate a world that often seemed designed for their failure. My name is Maya Rodriguez. I began. And 18 months ago, I almost lost my company to a predatory investor. For an hour, I shared our story, not just the battle with Vivian, but the full journey, losing my grandmother, envisioning a safer medical system, the rejections, the sleepless nights, the moments of doubt, and finally, the victory against all odds. What I've learned, I concluded, is that our vulnerability as underrepresented founders is also our strength. We are used to working harder, proving more, persevering when others would give up. And when we use that resilience not just to survive, but to change the system from within, well, that's when we create a true legacy. I paused, looking at the attentive audience. Many of you have probably heard about page 47 and how we used the very spot where Vivian hid her trap to insert our counter trap. What you may not know is that this has become something bigger than our specific story. I held up a document I had brought with me so everyone could see. This is what startup lawyers across Silicon Valley now call the Rodriguez Clause, a legal template founders can insert into investment contracts to protect themselves from hostile takeovers disguised as friendly investments. A murmur spread through the room. The beauty of the Rodriguez Clause is its simplicity. It stipulates that any attempt to alter the company's management structure without unanimous founder approval within a set period automatically triggers protections for the original founders. It's like an airbag for your entrepreneurial dream. Smiles of recognition and approval lit up the auditorium. But I didn't stop there. I continued. Today, I'm proud to announce the launch of the Rodriguez Fund, a $5 million investment vehicle dedicated exclusively to startups founded by women and minorities, with a focus on technologies that solve significant social problems. Applause erupted, some in the audience even rising to their feet. This fund will operate with full contractual transparency. No fine print, no traps, no hidden clauses, and every contract will, of course, include the Rodriguez Clause. I smiled. Because we all deserve the chance to turn our visions into reality without sacrificing control over what we create. As I wrapped up my speech, I noticed a familiar figure in the last row. Zoe Parker had flown in from London to be there. Beside her was Thomas Reed. And scattered throughout the audience, I recognized several founders who had once been on the list of Vivian's previous victims, now armed with knowledge and protections they hadn't had before. After the presentation, I was surrounded by young founders, each with their own story, each determined to build something meaningful in the world. One of them, a Colombian biomedical engineer, maybe 22 years old, held my hands tightly. "My father died because of a late diagnosis," she said, tears in her eyes. "I'm developing an AI system to improve early detection in rural communities. But every investor wants me to hand over control to someone with more experience. Your story gave me the courage to keep fighting." In that moment, I fully understood the power of resistance. I wasn't just saving lives with my algorithm. I was helping create an ecosystem where more innovators like that young engineer could thrive, where more lives could be saved by technologies that might never have seen the light of day in the old predatory system. 2 years after our battle with Vivian, HealthSync became a national leader in medication safety, implemented in over 400 hospitals. Our algorithm was preventing an average of 23 potentially fatal drug interactions per hospital per month. Vivian Blackwell, on the other hand, faced a slow decline. Though she quietly honored our settlement, compensating her previous victims, the damage to her reputation was irreversible. Elite venture capitalists started avoiding her, promising startups turned down her offers, and eventually, she withdrew from the investment world altogether. The Winter Rodriguez Fund flourished, funding 27 startups in its first year. All led by underrepresented founders, all using the Rodriguez Clause in every subsequent contract they signed. One spring morning, 3 years after that decisive confrontation, I received a small package in the mail. Inside was a single page torn from a contract. Page 47. And a handwritten note. "You changed the rules of the game. I underestimated you, and more importantly, I underestimated the impact a single determined founder could have on an entire system. Some lessons are learned the hard way. VB." I kept that page as a reminder, not of the battle or the victory, but of the responsibility that comes with influence, of the opportunity to turn obstacles into systemic change. In my office, beside a photo of my grandmother, there is now a simple frame containing a single sentence, the first paragraph of the Port Rodriguez Clause, which now appears in hundreds of startup contracts across the country. The original founders of this company, whose vision, work, and sacrifice created the innovation now being invested in, shall retain significant control over its direction and legacy, as detailed in the terms below. Sometimes, when work stretches late into the night, I look at that sentence and my grandmother's photo and think about the lasting power of small acts of resistance. How a clause on page 47 can become a movement. How losing a loved one can inspire a technology that saves thousands. How someone trying to take something from you can, ironically, create a legacy far more powerful than you ever imagined. Vivian tried to steal my startup, but in doing so, she inadvertently helped transform not just HealthSync, but the entire startup ecosystem, and that perhaps is the best revenge of all. Turning an attempt at destruction into the catalyst for a fairer, more equitable system that almost destroyed us. Page 47 was just the beginning. The real story was what came next.